You're close to Elon. I told you I may or may not ask you on the podcast. I've decided to ask you. I'm too intrigued. What's your relationship with Elon? And tell us some stories.
Well, I'm a good friend, and I've known him well over the last 20 plus years. I've seen this time and time again with Elon. Um, Elon has a little bit of an edge, right? The momentum that he has created is a whole flywheel in and of itself. The Midas touch, if you will, the presumption of succeeding is so strong. He's sort of bending the rules of what's humanly possible because he doesn't have to deal with the friction of rejection. If he says he wants to go do it, he's going to go do it at this point. If you're a force of nature, it's really about how much credit somebody going to give you to go out and do these things. I don't know if anybody's ever said this, but I think Elon is probably one of the greatest salesmen of all time. I mean, he is P.T. Barnum all the way. He believes in the things he says, which is really important. And he also has a very idealistic view of how things should be. It's almost as though every pitch is in the context of, if the following were true, then this would happen. And that's when he keeps saying that he is a, sort of physics-based, bottoms-up thinker. This idea of being first principles is really about understanding how to definitively say no to bad ideas. And bad ideas can come from experts, right? He's willing to step across that business risk moment and just say, yeah, but it should be this way. I think that almost everything that I've seen Elon do is first tested in the, sort of theory. So you would ask for a story, in November of 2019, and this is, I think, the way that Elon thinks. I was on my way to Tokyo to meet with Masayoshi Son, who invested in Fair considerably. Two totally different humans, but Elon had asked me, thought exercise, how could Tesla sell half of the cars in the United States? And it's funny because my initial reaction was, I don't think you can make half the cars. And he just cut me off and said, assume we can make the cars. How would you do it? Well, my answer went right to sort of the financial architecture of the theory behind, if you price the car at below the median price point, doesn't matter what the car is, people like the brand, and certainly they like Tesla, and it's reliable and predictable, you will sell half the cars. And that has been, I believe, a guiding principle for this argument that he's made around the vehicle must be affordable in order to scale. So it really is, what's the median monthly payment, and can we be below that number? And that's been a bogey that's been moving over the last 3 or 4 years. It started when I told him it was $500, a month. And he very, very astutely, I think, just priced his Tesla Model 3 lease below that $499 a month Mendoza line. And that has been the key to scaling that business and scaling that. He takes these really interesting sort of idealistic themes and then applies them in a very disciplined binary way, which is just don't let the car become unaffordable. And then whatever you have to do to get there is then justified. He doesn't really play by the same rules that almost everybody else in the car business plays by. And I think it's important that I don't, speak for him. I observe him just like everybody else does. I get a lot of people who ask me about the discounting, for example. I think I understand it, but maybe I don't. I can tell you that he has made most of the mainstream Tesla models and trims available to qualify for the full federal tax credit. None of the other new entrants from Rivian, Lucid, Polestar, Fisker, BYD, or VinFast have done that. Not one of those cars qualifies for one penny. He qualifies for it every time, and that's 20% of the cost of the car. And if you are thinking about discounting your car by another 5%, why not do it by 7% if the 7% unlocks another 20, right? So I think that there are some really interesting.
Is that one of the kind of financial hacks to autonomy? Is that one of your advantages?
There's headwinds, there's tailwinds, and that is certainly paying less for cars is one of those things. But I think that if we can reduce the cost of a car by as much as half by ensuring that we are able to harvest those tax credits, federal tax credits, incentives, rebates, discounts, all of those things. In California, for example, there's another $9,500 if you make below a certain amount of money. Well, $9,500, I mean, where we're at today on the Tesla Model 3 is it's a sub $40,000 car with a $7,500 tax credit, which we can harvest. That gets it down to the low 30s. You get another $9,500. You're in the mid 20s. If I can cap cost a car for 25 and put it to work competing against a brand new one that costs 40, that's a pretty definitive advantage that allows us to unlock cheaper. I mean, we deeply understand how that business works, but oddly, all of the raging debate around what is happening right now at Tesla, everybody thinks it's just very simply, he is giving up margin for scale. And the reason why he's continuing to discount is because demand is softening. But people aren't acknowledging the fact that when a car costs $40,000, most people don't pay cash. So the problem heretofore has been that interest rates have been going up. So traditional auto finance is almost dead on arrival everywhere. It's not as though demand is waning for electric cars. Demand is waning for anything that costs $40,000 where I got to go borrow a big pile of money. So I think that everybody is suffering that same problem. And what Tesla has done is really unlocked additional help to get you there. Unfortunately, it's very hard for an individual consumer to apply for and get or harvest the full $7,500 federal tax credit. It's largely a Goldilocks problem. If you don't make at least $115,000, you don't make enough to have a high enough tax bill to offset the $7,500. If you make more than $275,000 a year, you don't get it at all. Well, companies like ours, by design, can harvest the whole $7,500. That's a really important advantage for us. And it certainly informs how people are going to shift how they own these things. But, and I've had this conversation with CEOs of OEMs who are thinking Elon's going to have to wake up and smell the coffee. And I can just tell you, what if he doesn't care about volume or margin? What if his definition of success is how many humans are being driven by how many miles in an electric car? His belief is that everything will find its water level. And really, the core metric that I believe he works on, he knows exactly how many vehicles per square inch his factories can produce. And he is at Tesla pouring more factory floor square footage than all the other car companies combined in real time. So he's growing like a fractal. They're not catching up. He is going to continue, in my belief, to produce every car he can make at full tilt boogie. And while he was in his early days a build to order car company, which had a ton of advantages for him at that stage in his life, if he's crossed over and he said, look, it's $1 trillion, we're not going out of business anytime soon, the brand is where it is, we are going to make this happen. He's just going to keep producing every single car, every square inch of his factory floors can produce, irrespective of what the volume or the margin story is. And it may mean that he turns into a large rental car company that as those cars get a little age and a little used, they move over into a robo fleet. The robo taxi economics without having to pay drivers is astonishing. I mean, that car can earn a lot more revenue. So, it's very possible that Tesla doesn't even sell cars at some point, that these cars just get produced en masse to give us access to mobility.
So something that's wild that about our conversation is we've only talked about him being CEO of Tesla. He's also CEO of SpaceX, chairman and CTO of Twitter or X, founder of the Boring Company, co-founder of Neuralink, the president of the Musk Foundation, the co-founder of OpenAI, and now he's working on XAI. I know you say he has this, essentially advantage in terms of signaling and not having to fundraise and lack of friction. That doesn't fully explain it. He still is a man with 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. What makes him so incredibly effective?
Well, I think part of it is that you are measuring his effectiveness against the standard job definition of what is a CEO. Not as though he doesn't have astonishing humans running all of these companies. Gwynne Shotwell at SpaceX is probably the most under-accredited human in the history of business. I mean, she is building such a phenomenal organization that allows Elon to come in over the top and comment about 2 degrees to the left, 2 degrees to the right, but he's not managing it in the same sense that you would think of as a CEO. He is able to see the bigger picture. And, his ability to set his own calendar, for example, one of the craziest things about Elon is he doesn't have an assistant. He doesn't let and it's only for one reason. He doesn't let anybody else control his priorities. He decides what's most important. It means he can work anywhere, but when he tours his place, and I've seen him go through, Starbase or the Fremont factory, he's looking for his direct lieutenants and he's looking them in the eye and they're communicating. And there is the cult of Elon, and it's a big deal when he shows up physically. And, when he shows up and sleeps on the factory floor, that obviously makes everybody very, very tied into the fact that, okay, he's going to be here, get ready. And it's a leadership style. It's very palpable when he is, physically in these spaces and what things are happening around him. But he doesn't have to actually go and swing a hammer or do anything. Despite the fact I've seen him on the factory floor literally get in there and try to help show how the car needs to be made because it was engineered properly, fitting windows into the back of the cars and stuff. It's remarkable. You know, the old story about, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach him how to fish, feed him for a life. I mean, he really does rely on teaching and having people that are very, very tuned in to supporting and being a force multiplier for him. But he's not doing what you think he's doing.
Is
In
is
running.
that is that really his secret sauce, teaching? I've read the book and Demon Mode and all those things. He seems to be more than any CEO in the history of the world, really, to be able to extract more from every employee. What allows him to do it? How does he operationalize that ability?
Well, first of all, ask yourself, if you took away all of the politics of being a CEO from every great CEO and just said, focus on execution, how much more effective could they be? So what he's really done is he's shouldered the risk reward problem that any other CEO has and just said to his leaders, don't you worry about how we're going to fund this. Don't you worry about the risk. Don't you worry about X, Y, or Z. He spends his time focusing on the high level stuff that really matters, but he frees them up to get to work. So they're doing their best work. And I think that given that everybody is also a shareholder in these companies, their interests are aligned. And given the outsized returns that you see at, everything that he touches, I think everybody is inspired. They're motivated. This is what built Silicon Valley. I mean, this idea of sharing equity. This is what had not happened in the world before. Not just the internet, but also the, computer boom was about sharing ownership and sharing equity in a way that allowed management to win. That is a huge component of this. And whether that ladders up to his politics as a libertarian or whether that ladders up to his sort of worldview about everything, he allows the free market to sort of reward in a very, very literal way, in a way that does the inspiration for it.
Equity as a management strategy or as a scale multiplier. Speaking of equity, we're both investors in SpaceX, both relatively early on. What's the latest on SpaceX? I know you don't speak for the company, but what are your views on the company?
You know what? I think it's one of the most important companies, period. Not only are the results evidence of that, but, remember that movie Contact with E.L. Haddon? I mean, not
Yeah.
only Elon E.L. Haddon for sure. I think that this idea that we're living through this moment where human interaction is totally changing, the things that SpaceX unlocks, it's not just access to space for lower cost, but why? It's access to space for lower cost so you can launch more satellites, so you can make phones completely interactive, so you can connect humans in a much more frictionless way and to be more efficient. If you think about sort of the arc of humanity and where you've had massive jumps in progress, whether it's been the Industrial Revolution or the Renaissance, all of these things were about freeing up people's time. This fear about AI, people are missing the fact that all prior revolutions in history were really about resulting in freeing up humans to be able to go do other things that are more productive. It was first about getting people out of the fields and into the factories. Then it was about getting them out of the factories and back into school and so this idea that robots are going to take over and AI is going to make life easier. We're about to come into, I believe, an era of massive abundance. The whole concept of, how do you really use AI to sort of become smarter or more effective? I've got a 17-year-old who's using AI to read all the books in my library as summaries, just taking pictures of the books and then getting summaries and then asking the chatbot, correlations between all these dystopian ideas and these different authors. I mean, the level of insight that he's gaining is a step function better than just search, right? I mean, he is really becoming smarter. And I think that we are coming into a window, the age of experts is almost over. I mean, you don't need to have an expert to know the future of medicine or the future of anything where an informed point of view could be, more wise based on the collective knowledge of AI. So I think that SpaceX is a building block to unlock that flywheel. In the same way that I think Elon understands that, you know, his ability to do these things is unlocked by his wealth. I don't think he has the objective to be richer. I think he understands, though, that owning what he does of the company becomes very, very important as a lever. So make the company more valuable. I mean, that, that everything he is doing is based on sort of that flywheel multiplier effect. And I think that that has got to be part of any super impactful person's plan. They have to, it's not just like it used to be. I remember when I first became an entrepreneur, you think about your parents telling your friends, you know, is my son successful? Yes or no. It was just, have they had a big obvious win and did they get paid? The ability to really be impactful at this point in life, I'm 55 now, is really about how many resources can you put against a problem. Elon's at a moment where he has infinite resources to put at those problems, not just because he personally has those resources, because everybody who does is willing to make that bet with him. It's really powerful.
I have a contrarian view on SpaceX that, especially given Elon's now founding of XAI and literally a fleet of rockets, they will likely be the first company to land and mine asteroids, which roughly has about 700 trillion in natural resources. The conventional view would be that you have the founder's dilemma and you have somebody else come in and leapfrog with new technologies. I'm betting on Elon. I'm betting on Elon against the field to be the first trillionaire and more.
Yeah, it's interesting being in the business of putting people into an electric car. We're on the front line having to defend that propositions with there's a new batch of haters, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
the adventure into media comes with exposing yourself to criticism. Um, you know, Elon has not really had to do that up and until now because the things that he is doing are so high-minded and so impactful and so important to humanity that we've given him that whole pass. And I don't think anybody begrudges his success. I would submit to you that he is already a trillionaire.
Please expand.
Yeah. Well, I don't think people know how to do the math. Um, if you think about the companies he's created, I worry more about a different thing. I worry about the fact that we're human and, Elon's not the, cover of Men's Fitness right now.
Yeah.
I worry about his longevity. As a friend, I think one of the things that, intuitively you would assume is that if you've got those kind of resources, you would have somebody feeding you a science diet. I think that, he needs to make sure he is healthy. We want him to stick around for as long as possible. He is at this point largely not a traditional entrepreneur working on problems that have risk and reward. He is just saying, how much time do I have left and how much of a difference can I make? I think he has achieved a level of impact capability that is substantial enough to not have to accelerate that further to do what he wants to do. I think that all the things he wants to solve are solvable based on a sort of, a delegation strategy and an empowerment strategy. I mean, he has the resources and the ability to marshal those resources to do whatever he thinks matters. The question is, how long are we going to have him to be able to focus and redirect that energy? And who does he empower around him to make that a legacy? That's a really interesting set of problems.
I think you're a very good friend to care about that. I've been offered to be introduced to him actually twice. And my first thing was, he's very busy. There's nothing I don't want to take away from his energy and from everything that he's doing for the world. I'm always happy to serve in the Elon army. But in terms of, using his resources, shit talking him on Twitter, I think it's sad that people can't find something better to do with their lives.
For sure. And by the way, I don't think Elon is even an investor at this point, right? Because
Yeah.
he's beyond
Yeah.
money.
He's all in on his companies. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be more annoying to him to have to track it, right, than anything else, even if it was an outrageous success. Um, I think that there's probably a movie in what friends of Elon, and I know this generally about others, but over the years, the number of times I've been approached about an idea that somebody wants to pitch to Elon. And he will never even know the things that I've had to turn down on his behalf just because I'm deeply enough. I understand his orientation of these things. I mean, I've been pitched theme parks, where he can make billions if he would just lend his name. And I say, it's like Elon is going to do what? I mean, it's just, but he could make so much money. It's like, no, like he's not going to, I mean, he's doing very important other things. He would not even, and it would be embarrassing to put all these people together. He
Yeah.
also has a very real meritocracy based filter. Um, you know, Entertainment, Hollywood is all about who you know. Networking matters. In tech, totally not who you know. In fact, if you know somebody, it's probably going to be a demerit in terms of price. It's really about what have you done? Is it great? And you can know everything you need to know about a real entrepreneur like me based on going and looking at my products, the things I've created, and say, okay, that's interesting to me, yes or no, right? I think that's very much his filter too. It's sort of why he famously doesn't care what your degrees are or any of that kind of stuff. Tell me about how you solved a particular problem, how you evaluated it, what you did, and whether it worked, right?
I think part of the entire arbitrage of capitalism is finding value in something before everybody else does. And a lot of time that's about not only first principles thinking, but it's about looking at things from a non-superficial lens. And people that are able to do that in people and companies are the ones that are most successful. And of course, there's a paradoxical aspect to that because you see the billionaires going around that have done this systematically, and they're non-superficial people, and everybody's projecting superficial values onto them.
What Elon has done, which is really interesting, is he has really, at a fundamental level, broken it down and understood there's a flywheel to wealth creation. And in the beginning, it starts with being rapidly focused on what you believe and willing to ignore all of the experts that say it's not possible or it's not likely or it's not wise. He said famously many, many times that if something's worth it, even if it's unlikely, you do it.